the strategic plan,
Daniel,
it's
you
still
have
listed as marriage.
You have already taken your turn. I think it's,
Well, he
there are a
needs
lot
to
of
be
people.
confronted on this.
I hear you.
He can have our time. Go ahead. This is-
Go.
I'll give you my minute.
He's yielding his time.
Stand in line.
Stand in line.
Yes,
There is a line.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hear from everyone. I think the question that you asked, Daniel, okay, just wait a minute. Just wait a minute. The question that you asked does need to be answered. So if you wouldn't mind finding that, Guillermo, that would be really helpful.
Again,
And then we'll take
what
the
I
next
wanted to
person.
highlight again is the changes in the language that have been made to the strategic plan. My question is, why wasn't there a question posed for those boards as to where the association was heading? Just looking at the mission, for example, it went from being to the association dedicated to the advancement of the profession in 2007 to the association dedicated to the advancement of the mental health profession.
Just a minute, Guillermo. It's, I think the question was, where in the plan did the marriage and family therapists be taken out? I think that was the question.
You don't have the two.
You don't, if you don't have, he doesn't have the paper
He
here.
doesn't have the older one to compare
Okay.
it.
Yeah, okay, fair enough, thank you. You're next, Andrew.
Okay. My name is Andrew Getz, and I'm a newly licensed marriage and family therapist. Last year. And prior to that, my profession was as a nurse. And as a nurse, I'm used to a professional organization that fights for its members, that fights to protect the needs and the direction of the members in a very competitive, as you mentioned, Jill, a changing healthcare system. But I can tell you that the Nurses Association, the Nurses Union that I belong to, is not backing down and trying to include other people. They're focusing on the people that they were brought here to represent. And those are the people that are 100% dedicated to representing and to helping that profession make its way forward through this difficult time. So since I became part of CAMFT, and since I have been licensed, I've been talking to my wife, who's also a marriage and family therapist, as I've been reading the newsletters from CAMFT, and I've been actually shocked. I've been shocked to see the way in which that the goal that you've stated is the purpose of the organization, the purpose to move forward the profession of marriage and family therapy, is being watered down, misdirected, and it seems to me that there is a problem with the allegiance of the board and the executive director. To me, the allegiance of the board and the executive director should be to the members, full stop. Any concerns of strategic planning, looking forward, how we do this, should be secondary. The first and most important thing that I believe you all stated was the purpose of the organization. And I'd like to ask you, each of you, to restate, if you would, what your understanding of the purpose of the MFT, the CAMFT organization is right now. How do you understand that?
I don't have it in front of me, but to advance the art and science of marriage and family therapists as a profession.
So let me ask you this, how would that advancement occur by including other licenses as voting members in the organization?
Well, I have two responses to that. First is that's been our purpose for years. And I can tell you in the last 2 years that I've been here, and the legislation that I have seen put forth by CAMFT is different than the legislation that was done early on. And I can't speak to nurses, I don't know about that, what challenges there are in that field. But at the beginning of CAMFT's history, there was a very strong need for MFTs to be inserted in places in the law where you were not inserted, where you absolutely needed to be. And it was a very strong battle, and it was done very, very well. Up until, and it got CAMFT to a very important place in its stature and its history. And I say to people that my 2 years here, I've only been here 2 years, and that's my blessing and my curse. So my curse is that you're right, I don't know, like many of you in this room know what it was like when you started out and MFTs didn't have any respect, and you didn't get insurance, and you had to fight, and CAMFT had to fight its way to get to the table at these important coalitions statewide. So that's been done. That's my curse is that I didn't go through that with you. But my blessing is that I look at where you are today with very different eyes. And I look at CAMFT as an extremely powerful organization, extremely strong. And one of the main key cornerstones of CAMFT is advocacy. And in the last 2 years, CAMFT is so strong that, quite frankly, you are advocating for changes that affect all psychotherapists or protect the public. And so, to that end, you're already working on behalf of the whole psychotherapy community. If you look at the legislation.
Well, could I respond to that?
Sure.
I don't understand.
Actually,
Okay, could I respond to that?
Yeah.
I don't understand how you're, on the one hand, saying that marriage and family therapists have such a strong position within the state of California, that we're leaders and that other licenses are following that. And yet, on the other hand, you're putting out in the newsletter that marriage and family therapists are retiring baby boomers and that they seem to be becoming obsolete. I wanted to know, what is your actual, all of you on the board and the executive director, what is your actual allegiance to the license of marriage and family therapy?
I'll be really clear. I'm an LMFT. I'm proud to be an LMFT. I got into this profession as a second career because I love doing what I do. I don't want to go anywhere. I want to keep practicing until the day probably I die. I'll be one of those folks that they go, okay, it's really time to go. You're in a nursing home. You can't do this anymore. And they'll send some nice orderly in and let me pretend for a while. I love this profession.
Great.
I don't want it to go anywhere.
Good.
And I think that some of the decisions that the board made were for long-term gains. We're talking 30 and 50 years down the road. And it wasn't the intention of having short-term chaotic change.
So can you understand why the people in this room are feeling completely betrayed?
Completely. I understand that there is a lack of understanding on both sides.
And transparency, yeah.
thank you.
And I also apologize for if there's an implication that MFTs would be obsolete. I really think that when there's talk about baby boomers retiring, I apologize if that was interpreted that, it's a dying license, because it's not. It's just a reality that our membership is very heavily baby boomer age.
Yeah.
And that's not to imply that it's unimportant, it's going anywhere, it's obsolete at all. So I'll apologize if that was misinterpreted in anything I've written.
Okay, well, I'm hoping to have a long career as a marriage and family therapist, even though I'm a baby boomer.
You will.
And I hope that we'll get a strong board to represent that.
Hello, my name is Stephen Olbaum, and I'm a licensed marriage family therapist for 16 years. I have a thriving private practice in the Hayward-Fremont office with teenagers and families. And I also work at a hospital in the intensive outpatient program, and I'm a manager there. And I know, or I feel like my statement's just going to be wildly unpopular because I do want to support what's happening. The answers that I think that Andrew, before me, really wanted to hear, and I'm not part of the board, but there's strength in numbers, and you have to either grow or die. And that's, I think, the message of the baby boomers getting older. It's going to be wildly unpopular. This is not disrespectful. The elephant in the room, look at the age range. There's nobody under 40 in here. A lot of the interns, okay, I do supervise interns that I'm very proud of who are new into this industry. I've been an MFT on the track since I was 22. There's been amazing changes. I also fight daily with psychologists and LCSWs and psychiatrists to have us part of the discussion. And I'm a manager at a hospital, and I believe that represent our profession with other psychotherapists and LCSWs and other professionals. We are 30,000 in the state. We're not going anywhere. There are so many schools. There are more schools that pump out MFTs than LCSWs. I just had this conversation yesterday with management. Sure, it was a little clunky the way it was presented. I get management sometimes is not trusted, just like the government is not trusted, just like parents are not trusted. We make mistakes. You're here today. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the beating you're getting. I hope that we move on and we really embrace the future, because we have to be part of the LCSW conversation, the psychologist conversation. They do different work than we do. They're not going to take away our couples counseling and our individual, the work that we really are the best at. But we have to integrate, otherwise it's just not going to work. Right? As far as the vote question that came up before, nobody votes in this country. I mean, we have how many, 1,400 out of 30,000?
18,000.
18, okay. Look at the percentage of people who vote in general, right? And to me, it's almost like if you don't vote, you're like, yeah, I guess what they're doing really is supporting us. So the 100 or 200 people that are in here, I don't think, from what I'm talking, or the people who I'm talking to, represent every single person, right? So, and I find some of the conversations kind of disrespectful as well. Look, they're trying to help. I get they made mistakes. I've been a manager. I've made mistakes. I've made mistakes as a therapist. We're moving on. But it's not okay to keep beating them up and say, well, we need to reinvent all the wheels, because we got to keep moving. We got to come up to the 21st century.
Thank you, Stephen. You know, this may be a time just to have a 5-minute stretch break, just to stand.
No.
No?
No.
No one in favor?
No.
How are you three doing? You okay? Sure. All right. In that case, please go ahead.
Okay, hello, my name is Ernest Isaacs. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in Berkeley, California. I've been in therapy for 30 years, and I've been a member of CAMFT for over 20. I have one comment to make about something that came up before, which is not my main thrust, but I would like to point out that the reason there was only one hand raised in this room about the strategic plan is that it's buried deep within the website, and nobody has had the encouragement or the author, why don't you go and take a look at it? Nobody does.
I think that has been a very good lesson learned, that the strategic plan should be emailed to all members when it's completed and finalized, and it will be. That was certainly never done to be subversive. It was just never, quite frankly, I never thought of it in the last 2 years. I don't know what my predecessor thought before that, but that's easy fix. It will be done.
Okay, so when people are talking like you, Guillermo, about how come nobody ever watched the strategic plan, it's because nobody pays attention to it, really. So I want to put that out as a response to something coming before. But what I've been experiencing standing here is that you and in some of the letters that come by have certain arguments for making this change. And we have certain arguments for not making this change. And as Victoria, you were saying earlier about having a interaction with the 30,000 people in
I have not personally had interaction with all 30,000 people.
Oh, somebody said that. But what I want to point out is that you can do that. You can have an election. And I would like to understand from each of you, what is your objection to this reset that we're all talking about?
It isn't so much an objection to, I think it's an understanding that a reset button, I think even when we're talking about a reset button, I think we're not on the same page as to what reset would mean. As Jill has alluded to, there are some changes in the new bylaws that actually benefit the members and have taken into consideration some recent changes that the membership has asked for. For example, changes around the nomination committee. That's a huge part, in my opinion, that's being addressed through the new bylaws, because that process is no longer part of the bylaws. Now we're having a different process that's going to allow a lot more feedback and input from the membership as to what the nomination process looks like for members to be able to be put on the slates for elections.
Excuse me, Guillermo, can I interrupt, or you want to go ahead?
Just one last thing. So the reset button, again, I was thinking about this on the way up here, because, since last night there was a flurry of emails specific to this about reset. And so are we talking about a reset to 2005? Are we talking a reset to just May of this year?
May of this year. I can't speak for the rest of the audience, but for me, the nomination committee and the other kind of things, yes, they're also important. But the fundamental issue that we're really concerned about is this change in the focus of the organization and the change in the focus of the board of directors. What I'm proposing is that you have a reset button where you say, okay, we can go back to that in that category, and put out a ballot to all the members, like the state puts out for their propositions. There's arguments for, arguments against, rebuttal arguments for, rebuttal against arguments.
That's clear.
I would like to hear your objections to doing that.
I would just echo what a couple of people said, was that, it would disenfranchise the 1,002 people who voted for it. And I understand there could be people in this room who voted yes and didn't know what they were voting for. I can appreciate that. But not all 1,002 people voted yes and didn't know what they were doing, and it would disenfranchise a legally held vote like resetting the button. Secondly, there are the bylaws, as I've heard again and again, and this is kind of where, again, I hope I can understand this. The major concern is that the organization was not going to be for the purpose of MFTs, and that purpose was restored. There are lots of other changes to those bylaws besides a clean and modern format. I'll give you one example. There's a lot of little changes, but here, for example, in the bylaws, there was a 6-month grace period given for paying dues. Do you know how many of your colleagues would pay dues every 18 months and get their dues? They would pay 1-year dues for 18 months. It sounds insignificant, but I'm telling you, it was grossly unfair that many of you pay your dues when you get your invoice statement, you pay them and you're renewed for another 12 months. Many members would go the full 6-month grace period, then pay their dues, and they would get 18 months for 12 months. Again, I acknowledge that's a little piece, but I'm saying there was a lot of cleanup and important cleanup language in the bylaws beyond these pieces that we're talking about. So again, I go back to the purpose was restored. And now that is open for discussion as to what the purpose should be going forward now that that part's been restored.
I'm still not talking about the smaller parts, I'm talking about the fundamental changes that we're working with. And those 1,000 people will have a chance to vote again, that's just fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Eileen Flanagan. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I work in Antioch and in San Francisco in private practice. And I have 2 questions. And the first is, what I heard you say about the rationale for even having this change in the first place, changing the purpose and such of the organization, was an assumption that somehow marriage and family therapists were only baby boomers and eventually all of us would die away and there wouldn't be anybody left. And like, what was operating in your assumption to think that we weren't going to be around anymore, or I don't understand the assumption that we weren't going to be enough of us or significant enough. I don't understand that.
I think the assumption, and that's a great word because nobody has a crystal ball to know what this landscape is going to look like in 20 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. But the assumption is that students coming out of their bachelor's program, which master's program are they going to pick for which license ultimately? And we don't know that yet. We don't know whether an LPCC is going to be a more attractive route for those students starting at the very beginning of their career. So there are MFTs. There's thousands of MFTs in the pipeline. The MFTs are not going away. There's 11,000.
Yes, but excuse me though, but the organization made an assumption that somehow MFTs were not going to be enough. That's my question to you.
Because the assumption is that when students down the line have the choice between MFT and LPCC, there's no longer a guarantee they're going to go MFT because they now have the choice.
There never was. They could be an LCSW.
Right, but and again, I'm not a therapist. From what I'm told though, people who go LCSW it's a different orientation. That it's maybe there are people who pick between the two, but it seems that when somebody had the clinical orientation that MFTs had, there was one route for them, and now there's arguably 2 routes, and that's what the assumption is. What do we do to prepare for when we get to that fork in the road, what these students in the future are going to do?
Thank you, Eileen.
I have another question. And the other question has to do with the board process coming up to the vote in this bylaws, which, you've had a tremendous response from people in this room and people all over the state who are MFTs saying, we didn't know what was going on, we didn't understand the significance of the vote. What was your process like? And didn't anybody in the room say, wait a minute, we're changing the whole purpose of the organization, maybe we need to have a larger discussion about this? I'm curious about your process, because it seemed to me it was, it didn't really work very well.
Thank you, Eileen.
I mean, I don't vote, but there was deliberation. Of course, there was careful deliberation during the course of that these bylaws were discussed.
Mm-hmm. But why was it not considered significant enough to communicate with us that this is a very significant change that the organization is going through because we perceive that whatever? Why wasn't that communicated?
I think at the time the board's feeling was, and again, I can appreciate now that this was they underestimated it, missed the mark, that 6 weeks was going to be time, given that the bylaw, historically, bylaw votes have had 3 weeks' notice. This was given 6 weeks' notice.
But there was no communication that this is a really important issue and we need you to pay attention. It was communicated as this is sort of routine.
Indeed.
We're updated.
My position is there's a serious flaw in your process. There's a really serious flaw in your process.
So the vote
Thank
should
you,
be
Ivy.
rescinded.
Thank you. I think I can better answer that question. Thank you, Myron, for pulling up the strategic plans. That board that came to that decision, I think, was operating again under the context of that the language that was proposed in the new bylaws was not language that was already not in existence in the strategic plan. So here is the year, and again, this precedes me, but where the major shift was made, where the language stated that through CAMFT leadership and advocacy, marriage and family therapists are an exemplary profession.
Your battery is very low.
Professional resource for people seeking relationship or mental health services. That was the vision in 2006. That board and the strategic planning committee at that time changed the language, eliminating marriage and family therapists to the association, and actually they eliminated the name of CAMFT to just the association. Through leadership, education, and advocacy, the association and its members are an exemplary mental health professional resource for people seeking mental health and relationship services.
Excuse me, but wasn't it Truman who had the sign
Hold on a
that said the
minute.
buck
No,
stops here?
Jamie, can we please only do comments from the mic?
I'm
Let's show some respect here.
answering the question as to the process of this particular board, and what I keep going back to again is it wasn't this board alone in itself. This, again, involved 7 boards. It was a process that included all those boards and all those members of the strategic planning committees. I'll also add that year, the mission statement was changed again from CAMFT is dedicated to the advancement of marriage and family therapists to the association is dedicated to the advancement of the profession.
This is pretty generic.
I'm Kathy Knudsen. I'm a marriage and family therapist in San Francisco. I also work with the City and County of San Francisco as an assessor. I do a lot of work with data. So you're talking about that you didn't really understand how many people are actually going to be around. So let me give you the data. This is readily available from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. For 2010 to 2020, the projected percentage change of marriage and family therapists in California is 39%. That's quite a few people. Okay? Lots. Normally, it's way below that. Okay. So let's talk also about the age group differential. Okay, the labor force percent change by age group from 2008 to 2018. The largest increase is those over 65. There's going to be a 77.5% increase. Read it and weep. It means we are all going to be around. We are not going anywhere. So I would ask that you take a look at that. You take a look at everybody in the room and really get clear on the focus. We're not going anywhere. So I think I'll pass this around. I'll give this to you. Again, all this information is available. So here it is. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is David Glick. I was licensed in 1976. I've been around a long time, and I've been a member of this organization a long time. And I just discovered I'm not a baby boomer because I missed it by a year. But let me say a few things. I've been standing in line here a long time, so different things come to my mind, but I want to say them. First of all, it seems to me that you made a decision. I have no idea what was in your head. I don't know what your motivations were. I want to trust that they were honorable. But I think you must know by now, it feels to the majority of people in this room that they were deceptive. And if that's the case, one of the things you're going to be faced with is the organization could implode from within if there's that much divisiveness, because people felt that the bylaws were presented in a way that was not transparent and full and forthright. And I have a concern about that because I do care about this organization. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Now, it seems like you were concerned about what was going to happen to our profession down the line. But then on the other hand, you're saying that there's so many MFTs, so many more MFTs. It seems to me that if you were projecting something that was going to happen way into the future, 20 or 30 years ago, that is not the way you want to make a decision for an organization that is in effect right now. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I would suggest, I think a lot of people are saying that we would like you to reset in the sense that I guess the best way to put it is to go back to where things were prior to this. In other words, when you say that the purpose of the organization has been restored, but then we hear you say that there's no guarantee that the people on the board are going to be MFTs, it could be anybody, that's contradictory. That's why people are not trusting what you have to say. And so I would strongly suggest that we go back to where we were prior to this. One last thing I want to say. This feels to me very much like, if I can make an analogy, what happened when the Patriot Act was passed. And I'll tell you what happened there. The Congress did not read the Patriot Act, and they passed it. And then all of a sudden the ACLU has to go to the Congress to tell the Congress what the hell they voted for. And we're in a predicament about that. Now, if I follow this analogy, I have to say that unfortunately some of us were the ones who didn't read what we were asked to vote for. But the problem is, it was presented in a way that I think was quite deceptive. And so I think it's imperative that we go back to where it was prior to that. One last thought. If your concern is to bring together people from the various mental health professions, psychiatrists, social workers, LCC, MFTs, social workers, there's one thing that, and you're concerned about the changing demographics of healthcare, and you're concerned about the changing climate of healthcare. Maybe what we should be doing is working with those organizations to pass a single-payer health plan in California. That would be looking to the future in a very serious way, because that's the real problem. And finally, my last point is, if you're really concerned that our demographics of MFTs are declining, which I don't think it's true, but if you have that concern, that's a marketing issue, that's your job, go out and do it.
Would any of you like to respond to that?
Yeah. That'd be good response.
Can you guys hear me okay? I'm Laura Strom from Santa Rosa, California. I have a private practice there. And I think the problem is not whether we should ask in other professions or not. The problem is that the bylaw vote was mailed to us the first week of May, due back June 6th. On May 22nd, and I'm guessing the majority of those yes votes were already in the office. On May 22nd, that is when you informed us of the true intention of the vote. That left less than 2 weeks for people to actually cast an informed vote. And the bylaws state that we must have 3 weeks, right? And you gave us 6, but that we must have 3 weeks. But we only had less than 2 weeks of an informed time that we could vote. Therefore, that process is so fundamentally flawed that that vote should be considered illegal. And with regard to Guillermo, what you have said a couple times about past boards, I would like to read a statement that Mary Reimers-Ma published today that says, I've been following the group, that would be a Safe Camp group, from afar, and agree wholeheartedly in the tenor that has been put forward by the group. Richard is right on with his evaluation of the bylaws and the situation at hand. Daniel Sonkin is doing a terrific job in conveying the truth. I do not feel I can, skip that line. On the other hand, this is a taking, stealing of the organization. And what has occurred was never intended or envisioned by prior boards or me. Members, members should feel betrayed and misled. Further, besides the obvious, the bylaws that were put forward to the members for a vote were abominable. I am trying to stay out of the battle as my views are neither valued or respected given the current leadership. Mary Reamer's mom. My question is, what are you willing, will you go to your legal counsel next week and ask them what is the fastest, quickest way we can return to the old bylaws? Will you?
Well, I just want to say that it's not a question of what is it's very clear the way to do it. I mean, that's not in dispute how it can be done. The board needs to vote to do it, and then the board needs to send out a ballot, and then the ballot has to be the requisite time. I mean, that's not in dispute how it can be done.
Okay.
So I just want to clarify that that's not unclear.
Okay, and will you do that?
You should resign.
No, not okay.
No,
Respect.
thank you, let's be respectful.
It would be open to the whole board to vote for that, so none of us can speak for the whole board as to how they would vote. It's like asking this group, how would you all vote in an election? There are obviously different opinions within this room.
Is Guerrero or Vic, will one of you make a motion to do that with the board? Will you do it?
I will keep considering it.
It's a yes or no question.
No, it's not.
No, it
I can
doesn't.
answer.
Come on, please, let's be respectful here.
And Guillermo?
I think I